allow you to. What prevents that? Unless I'm misreading something.
Yeah, you still need to pass constitutionality checks. So
right, but if you list out the constitutional justification for each change,
okay,
in that same bill, and it passes the constitutionality check, how would it be blocked?
So give me an example, because you're saying hypothetically you could submit it, but it's not going to. When you say that there's no way to stop it, that's inaccurate, because your introduction. So are you familiar with how legislation gets pushed forward today?
Yes.
Okay. So how are you going to start the writing of your bill in this hypothetical case where you're, I don't know, making gun change laws and simultaneously changing traffic law? How is that going to look like? You know what I mean?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
sorry about that. I think something got stuck in my throat. So the answer is essentially, if I put in the introduction that this bill serves to update weapons and traffic laws in San Andreas due to recent criminal activity that has heightened in these arenas.
Okay.
I can address both in one bill.
Okay, and what's the reasoning?
The reasoning would be due to an increase in, I don't know, let's say boost crimes that have resulted in shootouts. Okay. We're making these changes to traffic and these changes to the weapons laws.
Okay, and if that were the case, what's the issue?
Well, the issue probably isn't anything under you, but it's we're operating under the assumption that no one's going to sneakily try to title a bill, let's say, protecting citizens against violent crime, right? And then the citizens see that, they go, okay, great, our mayor's moving towards, keeping us safe from violent crimes. But then further in that bill, it addresses other topics that maybe is not what they're talking about to the public.
I understand what you're saying, but okay, I see your concern. So your concern is, what if someone writes legislation that sneaks in changes that are not in line with what the written purpose of the bill is?
Correct.
So the preventative measure is a contest.
Sure, and absolutely, that's a great right we can use to do things, and I don't disagree with that, but why leave a door open when we don't need to?
Because it's San Andreas. If we really wanted to keep zero doors open, our legislation would be so expansive, and it's I understand what you're saying, but you have to understand that, like, what you're pointing out is like one of like dozens of things that could in theory happen, but that's why we have measures in place that if it happens, we have a way to battle it. If we go in right like extremely, I'm just gonna use the phraseology, look, we can write really sweaty legislation, but then no one's gonna understand how to handle it. So.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my point, is avoiding the ability to do that. Does that make more sense?
No, I get that.
Avoiding the confusion it could cause people
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not a practical concern, because hypothetically, I could literally say, people with red hats are not allowed to live in San Andreas. Right? And if nobody
and it
notices,
would honestly probably pass today.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you could, in theory, do that, and you could make an argument that even though there's like the right to dignity, we need to ignore the right to dignity because people with red hats have a propensity to commit more crimes. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, that's what we're going to do, Los Santos, and no one notices. and now all of a sudden people with red hats start getting deported, right? So
Right. No, I understand your points. Like, they're
Yeah.
not any less valid than mine, and
yeah,
that's why you're the mayor and I'm not. Is which ones
Yeah.
do we balance, right?
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, you know, the bills are designed in such a way that you can touch multiple pieces of legislation simultaneously. However, it is important that those who write such a thing, that their bill is properly documenting what the reasons and why something is changing. Because in theory, even the example that you used here, like, a bill might address something where you need to fundamentally change different pieces of legislation. As an example, if we were to pass a bill that increased speeds on the road, you have to touch the traffic law ordinances. You simultaneously also have to alter the penal code, which is another piece of legislation, right?
Right, but I guess the difference in my mind, and again, I understand your points, and
Yeah.
if you think that's the better path forward, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I was here 5 years ago, and you're probably the most effective mayor I've seen.
I appreciate that.
Essentially, my concern is limiting it to one topic, right? Not limiting it to one piece of legislation.
It has to be one topic. Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying. I think we could probably write something in there. I'm not too worried about it right now. Simply in that. So the general approach, and I'm gonna tell you like this. Yes, there are bad actors. Some of those bad actors no longer work because they ended up quitting before they could be held accountable. Just transparently, they see the writing on the wall, they dip. And it is my office and hopefully more lawyers that are produced hold people accountable if they're doing shady shit. And people have been taught a lesson already, right? Whether it's the impeachments, whether it's the, things getting contested, et cetera, et cetera. It's very difficult to stop shitty people, but we have the mechanism to do it. And I think that's why it is important for every legislative authority and civilian to point it out if it's happening. The alternative is, because we did go down the route in the past to make sure things were written in a way where they wouldn't get... I'll give you an example, right? We, back in the old director / justice did a bunch of dumb shit and shadow edited a bunch of legislation that was outside of her authority. She ignored all the laws, just claimed a bunch of bullshit. We fought it. We won that. We ended up updating the legislation, the one that you're looking at, in order to make things fit, not just the intention, but also the Constitution. In there specifically, there was a line that still allowed the justices to alter the penal code with the understanding on the language and the discussion around it that there would be the mechanism. Then there was, by the same individuals, 3 months later, once it passed, one of those individuals that were in these meetings then, for some reason, forgot the months of conversation, forgot his comments on the documents, and intentionally misinterpreted basic English grammatics in order to push a bunch of penal code changes, right? My point
so that
there
explains
is
all the audit.
yes. So the problem is that when things like that happen, we can write so many checks and balances in legislation, but we're still, at the end of the day, if someone wants to abuse something, they'll be able to do it. If someone writes legislation that might be abusive, it may still slip through the cracks. So the best measure is keeping an eye on it and auditing it when those things happen. That's honestly the best route with it. Because the more measures you end up writing up, right? Your document ends up getting very long, and you end up, in a way, gatekeeping gatekeeping the rest of the city from understanding things that are simple. Like, for example, a piece of legislation that's only half a page is going to be read and understood by the majority.
Right.
If something is like 5 pages long because it's trying to close every potential loophole, no one's going to read that, and now there's only 2 experts, right? So
yeah, and I guess that was kind of like, and I do agree with your points 100%. I just think that was kind of my concern was
I think it's
getting rid of the ability to write multi-page pieces, because that's been done in the past. I mean, I'm sure you remember, and it never works out well.
I don't know if anyone's actually done that before. It's possible. I don't think it's happened. I will say that my team's really good at looking at these things. Even when we're out of office, we're going to look at it. But I also understand we need a system that is going to live past, where we are right now. But part of it is we have to wait till someone does some dumb shit and then clean it. That's probably the best way to do it because, like I said,
100%. Yeah.
This issue that you're bringing up, yeah, it could happen. But as I mentioned, there's dozens of other things that could happen as well. It's just, it doesn't make sense to go and attack each and every one. You know what I mean?
Right. You're trying to pick which battles to make it as clean and easy as possible, which makes total sense.
Yeah. It's better that if someone does it, you assume they didn't do it maliciously, because that's a battle you're never going to win, because there's no way we know what people are thinking. They'll get away with it. Bad actors will bad act. And
yeah, it's just how this city works, to be honest.
Exactly. And then when it happens, you stop it, and then we put in the patch, right? Instead of pre-patching everything,
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I just wanted to, because I could tell from reading it that, a big goal was making things easier to understand and making it clear to the general public. So that was something that I felt to bring up.
No, it's
and then I just had a couple other like minor suggestions.
Let me just give you one more angle here. Is that the original document that we wrote was twice as long, covering these bills, and it spelled out exactly how the templates look, how you deal with different scenarios, etc., etc. But at the end of it, that document got way too long, and I had it trimmed back down. And instead, we're leaning on the example of, we're going to pass this, we're going to show how it can work in practice, and then sort of like re-tailor the wording based on what's working and what isn't working, which is a lot more fluid than, making extensive legislation that tries to portray every little nuance, right?
Yeah, because you're never going to be able to, right? Like in law school, that was one of the first things I learned was you can't write a perfect piece of legislation. It doesn't exist. It's impossible.
Yeah, exactly. There's and not to mention you're never going to get it passed, right? Because the more complicated it is, you're adding more points of contention. So
right. And not only that, but it's like, words have very specific meanings, right? If we asked, 30 people in the city to write us a law to prevent...
Do you want to meet at the Liquid Library and bring up your other points? I got to get out of here soon. I just, I'm with Michael right now, so he can hear some of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I will be there shortly.
Yeah. All right. See you soon. Bye.
Thank
We need a thing where I can let you... You know what? You need to get one of those phone tappers. Do you have enough news rep?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should get you a phone tapper, because that way,
Yeah, sure.
So, long story short, he was talking about...
Alejandro? That's my guess.
No, I don't know who this is.
Okay. My guess was Alejandro. It sounded like something that he would raise up.
I'm going to lean on it's probably someone I inspired to come into the city to be a lawyer. Yeah. That's what it sounded like. I could be wrong. It's oh shit. Well, he said he was in the city for 5 years, so who knows? He made. I think, and this is important to point out, is he's overly concerned. How do I put this in? How do I phrase it? I have to be fair here because I think he's overly concerned about something that he doesn't need to be concerned about. but that's mostly because, he's inexperienced with what's happening in the background, which I don't expect 99.9% of people to understand. The TLDR is he's like, well, there's no clause in here saying you can't do like omnibus changes or whatever. I don't know what the fuck that was. I looked it up and it's like when you change multiple pieces of legislation once, and I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to do this. He's like, oh, like we need that. And he's like, yeah, but what about if someone does something like, you know, class 3s are illegal now. And by the way, you can kill people in a car. You know what I mean? And my TLDR
we could do that right now if we wanted to.
Yeah. In other words, he's talking about prefixing things before, like prefixing shit before,
letting it play out and letting the tool solve it himself, right?
Yeah. And to be fair, we went down that route and we learned that's just not the way to do it, you know?
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. So, all right.
Oh shit. I didn't know this room existed.
Wait, what do you mean? What?
Can I own this?
Someone already asked me and we're not allowed to do it. So
like lend lease.
I'll
pay you and I just get to tell people that it's mine.
It's funny you
but
say that.
I don't actually have a lock on the door.
No.
I'm going to tell people it's mine anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you. I'm Wes.
Hey, pleasure to meet you.
Do you mind if I sit next to you?
Oh, here, let me move.
This guy actually looks like Max. What the fuck? I thought Max heard it and he came in, but this isn't Max.
Yeah, I mean, you basically summed it up for me. It was just simply raising that concern. I did have a couple other things that were unrelated to that piece. I just read that on the docket this morning.
Yeah.
Or rather, the City Hall website, and was curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think when it comes to like the majority of things, our experience has told us that it is better to keep things simple and try to make it very clear when certain things are major no-nos. Outside of that, it's better to wait until someone does some dumb shit and call it out and contest it and stop it. And if it becomes a problem, legislate it out. Otherwise, right now, most people aren't willing to even look at what the law is. The justices themselves, by and large, do not know what the law is. Like, minus like maybe Faulkner and Sean, to be honest. Like genuinely, they don't they've been doing. Some of them have literally just been making decisions without. They're not keeping up with it. You know what I mean? And if they can't keep up with it, how do most civilians? So most of the stuff has to be a lot more simplified and targeted. But
well, that we can definitely agree, because coming back after 5 years trying to go look up laws, the legislation tab was
what's your name, by the way?
A nightmare. Wes.
All right, easy. Wes, do you have a bar license?
I do not. So 5 years ago, before I changed my name, I was here and I trained under Reggie Might, if you remember his attorney days.
Oh, really? Well, what's stopping you from getting a bar license now?
One, where would you even find that process in our current legislation?
Oh, you literally just passed the bar. Yeah, there's little things like that need to be sorted, but you just contact Sean or Faulkner, and they can get you. Just let them know you have a background, you want to study. It's a judge right now. We are working on a bar association to sort of sort that out. But
yeah, because back in the day, it was.
Wait, what was your name before?
Zarek is
Oh,
the name that Reggie may remember me under, although he trained several people and did a lot of screaming at us, and I've heard he's gone a little crazy, so I don't know how good
yeah,
his memory would be.
I think he robs banks nowadays, but I'm not certain.
That's what I've heard. And the other answer to your question is I actually applied for PD. So after I did that, I left for 5 years and did EMS in the great state of Arizona and decided to take a different route. So I've been doing mechanic
Okay.
stuff and I have my application in for LSPD.
Okay. All right. You had other concerns?
These ones are more just suggestions. So there's two things I noticed, which my understanding is you're addressing one of them, which is essentially the ill illegibility of our fucking current law system and the penal code specifically.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so essentially, for instance, if like I said, I came back after 5 years. Okay, what are the traffic laws? Right.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I go to the legislation tab, I search traffic, right? I can find
Michael, I'm going
speed
to have you take
limits,
this one.
which is great. But one of the things somebody actually had to tell me that I didn't know was the change to being a stop and go state, because there's still a charge in the MDT that has disobeying a traffic signal listed.
Mm-hmm.
And nowhere in that charge does it explain red lights are treated as stop signs.
You're absolutely right on that one. The penal code is honestly a giant can of worms that is a massive priority. And when I say that, what I mean is the penal code needs to be made to align with legislation. It's one of the big reasons why we ran again for a fourth term. And it's honestly our highest priority, making sure that the charges that are in the penal code have legislative backing, that they're clearly defined, that they make sense.
And that they don't just contradict legislation, which is what I noticed with some of it.
It's worse than that.
Chat, as soon as this is done, I'm getting on Brian.
Contradict themselves in their own definition.
I promise.
Oh yeah, I did catch some of those actually.
Yeah.
Or it's just sorted terribly, right? So you have crimes against person, but then if you go to public order or public safety, you also have crimes against persons.
You're absolutely right. Fraud is another example. There are fraud charges under multiple categories. I believe there is a section for fraud, but then identity theft, I believe, isn't under that section. There's no shortage of issues with the penal code, and the unlawful changes that were made back in February are just one part of the problem, right? I think if the penal code was left as it was before February 9th, it was still a ticking time bomb. There are still a lot of things that need to be fixed with it. So you're right in that regard.
I think the other thing to point out here is keep in mind that we're the only ones that have been advancing legislation, and now with Princess, like 90% of it. The people that had control of it literally just did dumb shit and didn't evolve it forward. So just me being rather frank. And we are now in the process of, and this is why, yes, the bill does allow, the bill changes do allow us to change multiple things at once. But the key for that is right now there's like 100 documents. It needs to be brought down to criminal codes that highlight areas of law. And whereas right now legislation is effectively bills where they address very specific things, right?
So you want to move to a statute system?
Not necessarily. It could be statutes, legislation, could be acts, it could be a number of things in that space. Yeah. So I think statute system is a little too specific, but kind of.
Effectively, the bill would declare something. Either something new would become unlawful, something that is currently legislated would be changing or be repealed. And rather than the bill itself becoming a new piece of legislation that people need to understand, a larger, broader piece of legislation just gets amended to include or remove or change a single clause, right?
Right. So, for instance, like you'll have, let's say, I don't know, a law against unlawful detainment, right? And in that law, it would say, one charge
Wait, actually, I think it's actually not far off now that I'm thinking about
imprisonment. It defines what both are, and then it's charged under whichever.
I do want to actually run back, thinking a little bit more about you saying that a statute system. I think that's actually pretty accurate. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, that's what
I know there's some fringe things that, like, there might be still some acts, right? But I would imagine I would want like Los Santos acts as like one piece of legislation if they're like fringe cases, right? Like if we said like, hey, you can walk around with your dick out or some shit like that, that would be like the Dick Out Act, Dicks Out for Harambe Act or something, and that might be in like a
mayoral decree section.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's right. It effectively is a statute system. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but that was
to be clear, just to tack on, it is a statute system, but it is going to coexist with civil and case law, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's case law applies to either civil or criminal, dependent on what the case law is based on.
Correct.
But then you have, criminal laws typically under a code or a statute, and civil is typically under, procedures in common law, for instance.
That's right. Yeah.
No, that totally makes sense. The other two things I noticed coming back that were interesting is property and the scarcity of it. I don't know if it's possible, but if you can, it might be worth it making some kind of middle class apartments, right? Where it's not a million plus
already
for
tried.
A piece of property.
Yeah, that's something we've already pushed forward. There's a lot of limitations since we were working on Project 2025, which taking a lot of resources. So
makes total sense. Yep. And then there was one more. Give me 1 second. Oh, yes. There's no, and we talked about this briefly one day, Mayor, which was there's no real communication from the police departments to the public.
Yes, so, that is true and unfortunate.
I think personally, my recommendation would be you pick somebody, maybe it's Martha, the receptionist.
Just real quick, Michael, I forgot to add that. We need to add a system where if someone does, it's lower than an ACR, is that people can file a formal request, whatever we want to call it. Today, when you go to the PD and you're like, yo, this shit happened, there should be a formal request that if they put it in, maybe it's $25,000, I don't know, the PD actually has to give a public-facing response. We heard about this. These are our findings. This is what we did.
I think you'd have to be careful with that one due to privacy of the officers involved.
They're public servants.
They're public servants, but their personnel files typically aren't, neither disciplinary records under most case law.
What, in San Andreas or anywhere else?
In San Andreas, to my knowledge, unless it happened during the 5 years I was gone, they were never public record.
No,
and typically in other states, if you will, personnel records and like disciplinary files are not under public disclosure laws.
Because
they're by necessity private documents.
That's not entirely accurate. The full details of it would be, but for example, if you filed a complaint to the law enforcement, the filings of that is open to FOIA, as well as the conclusionary information that comes out of it. There may be personal things that you're referencing that cannot be put in the letter, but if you got like I don't know, if some cop took a piss on your lawn, right, and you filed a police report, they would still provide you a document, not necessarily that, hey, we find them this or find them that, but like certain details can still come out. Like, it's not like,
but it only in criminal cases, and I think that's the problem. Is like what you're referencing is by definition a crime, right? Whether you call it indecent exposure or vandalism, whatever, it makes it a crime, which opens it to the public domain. But when it's simply an internal policy violation, that is by nature a private internal document.
Not everywhere.
Yeah, not everywhere.
There are a lot of places where any disciplinary action of a public police department are considered a matter of public record, and you wouldn't even need to FOIA them.
Listen, I'm all for it. Like, I'm not against it, and I hope you guys succeed in that, but I think that'll be a hard fight.
Wait, why though?
Because there's an easy constitutional challenge under right to dignity or right to privacy.
Yeah,
because the way it's written, it essentially, think of it like if a cop wants to raid you, right? They can search your house.
This guy, but this guy's also extremely cooked.
Subpoena or explicitly stated in the signed warrant the ability to search your phone because the phone contains private data.
Okay, but by that logic, you can't subpoena a phone.
No, you can, but it's
because of legislation.
An exception to, like, for instance, if you get pulled over, they could, and they have enough PC, they can search you, right, or the vehicle, but they can't just go through your phone. Even if you were on the phone when you committed the crime they believe you committed. They have to file a separate subpoena for that.
Yeah, but you're missing something. Is the Constitution and all your rights are still subject to everything else written in that document. And the reason why I'm bringing up a subpoena is by the logic of there is a right to dignity, it infers that you wouldn't be able to do something like a subpoena. But that is why exceptions are made, and just like that, something like this, exceptions would be made because people have the right to. It's a matter of public interest.
I guess my point is you would have to, like, the current way it's written is essentially the way around or into that right. For instance, is a signed order from a judge.
Well, no, it's less than that. It's that people have a constitutional right to information, and the PD are a public sector entity. So there's nothing that's classifying disciplinary records as inherently private if they're a public sector entity and people have a right
Mayor
to
Nino
access
on
public
top, psych. Wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, it would just be a matter of posting it up, to be honest with you. I don't see an ability to challenge this on constitutional
I'll be
grounds.
honest, it would pass the public vote anyway, even if it was contested. Let's be real.
Sure.
Because I just spent most of today and some of last night doing a survey for Elena's office about BCSO. And I can tell you one of the key pieces of feedback I got that wasn't BCSO specific was exactly what you're talking about, which is even if they do take appropriate disciplinary action, how would I ever know?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I think, go ahead, Nino.
I'm still sort of stuck on, like, I don't know where your background is, but you know this, wherever you go for a vacation, you know if someone does something to you, you can go and file a criminal complaint, or not a criminal complaint. You can file a what is it called? Oh my God. You can file a
civil complaint.
Yeah, you can file a civil complaint with the police department, and they have to give you something back. I mean, they could refuse to do so, but most places are going to give you something. There's details they can't put in it, right? Like, they can't say, hey, we gave you like a DAP or something like that, but it still needs to be something of merit that gives you it. Think about it this way. There are things I'm sure you've seen on news stories where there's like a press release, right? They don't wait.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like, and those press releases.
Essentially, like,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Like those press releases, like sort of, like are even a further step forward where it's like, hey, like, listen, I'm not going to use any examples because some of them are pretty bad. Like the guy that fucking started firing his gun when a acorn fell, right? His chief
Yeah.
literally made, went up to a microphone and said, yes, we had a person who did this shit and we are taking it very seriously. He's been now suspended further investigation, right? So,
Right, but what's the follow-up after that is my question. Like, that's the key part.
Well, like I
is,
said, there's
yes,
lines.
you can do that release,
Yeah.
but you can't then say, okay, we concluded the investigation and he was suspended. He was terminated. You know what I'm saying?
No, you could, though. What do you mean?
The only time I've ever seen that done is usually accompanied by when relating to police criminal charges.
No, brother, that's literally common. You watch any of these police channels, those are matter of public record. A police in the United States, salaries, status, whether you work for the government, all those things are open to FOIA. Like you can look up any cop in your town and find out how much money they're making.
Sure, but usually disciplinary records and personnel records require more than a FOIA.
That is true, but that's way more specific, right? Like, well,
that's kind of my thing, right? Like, it's very easy to, and again, I hope you guys get it through. I hope it goes through.
Yeah.
But it's the interesting part for me is where do you balance the right, essentially, because you have to have a balance. Right. I shouldn't be able to walk into LSPD and say, I want to see every single time Bradford has ever gotten a DAP.
Yeah, but DAPs, once again, DAPs are internal, right? What isn't internal necessarily is if someone got suspended or fired, right?
Yeah, I hope it goes through. I mean, I'm not against it. Even with applying to be an officer, I think it's a public responsibility that shit's communicated. Bluntly, I'm shocked by the fact that you can have officers incorrectly use lethal force and not get charged, let alone suspended, to my knowledge.
Well, that's a much bigger problem. We're dealing with elements within police forces that function more as gang members than they do law enforcement officers. And
there's a reason I applied for LSPD, not BCSO.
And good choice. And there is the thin blue line that runs strong. Luckily, a lot of that has been broken in certain areas, but there is the notion. I mean, it happens across the United States too, right? Like motherfuckers will pretend they saw nothing. Like that's how. Even with body cam footage, right? There's plenty of body cam you'll see like all the time where someone will do something egregious, like there was one. I was watching the other day.
In Florida.
Yeah, there's one like this is an old one, but it's a good. It's an oldie but goodie. Is New York cops, young, probably like late 20s. And they pulled over a guy, got him out of the vehicle, and the guy came back, and you see in the body cam him opening up like a medicine bottle and putting shake on the guy's center console, and then saying, "Oh, look, we found it," and he spread it out and everything, like just plain in day, and that's like blatant, but. You'll see even body footage. Like, I bet you pull up like any kind of like corrupt cop shit. You'll see it like shit happens all the time. Like they'll see on the body cam, like they'll turn off their fucking camera and talk in the side. And then all of a sudden there's a new story that comes out. And how do you break it? Because now you got to go to all the body cam footage and see. I'm going to give you the most simple example. Dumb fuck Quangle from BCSO.
I know him.
Wait, what do you mean?
He responded to I think it was a Fleeker jewelry store I was a hostage in, and
Yeah. Oh, you know him. Okay, not like a bad experience type thing.
I wouldn't call it a great experience. It's probably the most terrified I've been as a hostage in the city.
Well, I meant with him in particular, but he's not the worst guy. He's just what happens when there's no discipline is that he pulled over a vehicle and then in the that was pulled over getting gassed up, and his probable cause for the traffic stop changed 4 times until he decided on a charge post facto.
That's not how probable cause work.
100%. But the thing is, when you have someone dumb like that, they're going to do what they think is right because his superiors are dumb as shit. In fact, these dumb fucks in their high command think nothing wrong happened because, once again, they don't understand the basics of the law. But what made it worse is he also stalked. He also did some other things. Now, the reason I bring that example up is that's actually pretty normal for cops around here, that they'll pull you over because via profiling, right? Where in San Andreas, it's profiling by affiliation, right? Thank God. And then we'll find a reason to, get you out of the vehicle, search you. Now, in certain states, that a segment of that is called pretextual stops, right?
Correct.
That is at least understandable. You committed an offense, and it gives you enough room to, search for something else. But the problem is that what was happening is that people were doing worse than a pretextual stop. They would start with something, realize that something isn't there, and they would do what the case of Quangle. How are you going to know in the report that, like, let's say in the case I was referring to, it started with a broken taillight, which isn't a law. It ended up with reckless endangerment. How are you going to know that he made that post facto decision? Now, in certain states, as soon as the traffic stop happens, they actually, because, there are a lot of states now or towns, they got the camera inside of the vehicle.
Yep.
They actually have to state that either on the radio or on the camera that I'm pulling him over for this. It's recorded, right?
Yeah.
And we're actually going to be bringing something like that forward because you can literally lie about it. You know what I mean? What's going to stop anyone? God forbid someone pulls out a gun on a cop after a broken taillight, but only after they pulled him out, beat them, right? Searched them illegally. How's everyone going to defend themselves against that? You know what I mean?
Well, first you can't, and I guess second is you also need to have a time limit for a traffic stop, right? Because that's an issue you can still happen, where essentially they can have a PC reason to pull you over. But if we let them fuck around for 2 hours, holding them there, yeah, they're probably going to find something else.
Well, it has to be reasonable, right? But you're right. That's currently technically not in legislation. But those are the things that we need to tackle.
Yeah, and so the other point was essentially, I think
he's
you're the mayor, right?
Cooking it.
Create a position within your police department. Call it a public information officer.
Yeah.
You don't have to hire somebody new, but assign somebody. So for things like the bombing, he's
overcooking, but he's got good questions.
There's actual. This is who you can contact if you're the news. These are the people who are going to release an announcement, whatever the case is.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
And none of this is me trying to shit on the police departments. Bluntly, it's a million times better than 5 years ago when they raided the fucking apartments every fucking day, if not multiple times a day. I don't know. You probably remember that. It was, it was insane, dude.
Wait, which was this?
At Alta Towers.
Wait, what happened at Alta Towers?
Oh my God. They would there'd be a raid on somebody's apartment every day, if not multiple raids done in one day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You'd go to leave your apartment and walk into a fucking shootout.
That is crazy. Yeah, I remember that. Luckily, things like that kind of happen still today. I mean, there are, you know, there are limitations, you know, the things that we got to deal with, unfortunately. You know, it's like, what do you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it still has to be, you know, a desirable place to live and work for everybody too. And that means everybody, you know. So like when I did the survey, I went to every major set in the city and called them and said, hey, can I come down and ask your family, you know, this list of questions?
Yeah. Well, hey, brother, this has been a good conversation. I'm down to have a couple more. It is getting late, and I do got to get out of here, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
So
Have a good night, you guys,
absolutely.
and good luck.
All right. All right.
Thanks, Wes. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Hey,
Nice to meet you, Michael.
You as
Best of luck on the application.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, a little overcooked, but he's kind of new too. So, all right. Well, let's check that that paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
All
right. About an hour.
Yep. I think he was overthinking things.